Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast. And we've now reached 2009 in our exploration of Asian horror films. We're going to cover about 30 movies or so from this year, most of which I enjoyed, so that's a good thing. But first we have some honorable mentions, of course. And remember, these are movies that some people classify as horror films, but I do not. I don't really think I need to mention that many films from this particular year. Except for maybe one that stood out. There was a rather unique film that came out in 2009 called Vampire Girl vs. Frankenstein Girl, from the director of Tokyo Gore Police, actually, which I enjoyed. But it's more of a romantic comedy with some bloody action spliced in and a little bit of horror. I do recommend it if you want something a little bit silly and different. That's the only one I feel like I need to honorably mention from this year. So let's get started with these horror reviews, and as always, titles for all the movies I discuss will be listed in the description box below. And as usual, we begin with the worst Asian horror film from 2009, in my opinion. It's really between two movies, the competition here for this prestigious award. None of the Asian horror films from this year were really able to lower themselves to the point of becoming completely worthless garbage, with the exception of one film from Hong Kong and one film from Japan. And the winner is from Hong Kong, and that is The Unbelievable. So this is a documentary-style horror film about a group of people who attempt to uncover paranormal phenomena. So I read up on this, and apparently this film was inspired by a real-life reality show of sorts in Hong Kong that is similar in some ways to Ghost Hunters, or something like that. You know, where you have videotaping that's done in supposedly haunted areas, and then discussion is held regarding the incident and what may have caused it. So this was apparently a very popular show that lasted for 10 or more seasons. But this movie version is just god-awful on almost every level. So first of all, the sound design is atrocious and highly obnoxious. It repeatedly uses loud booms to provoke jump scares because the filmmakers are too incompetent to construct effective tension. And remember, this isn't a documentary-style format and involves paranormal phenomena, which should give ripe opportunities for creepy, disturbing imagery and suspense. That's not the case with The Unbelievable, because it really feels like the filmmakers put no effort whatsoever to craft something that has a long-lasting scare effect. It's all cheap, and it kills the film. Did you hear that? See, that's a snowplow. That's where I live. We have snowplows. They do a good job. But anyways, even if you like cheap jump scares, I suspect that you will come away from this movie dissatisfied anyways, due to another worthless tactic that it uses. Graphic animal mutilation. Oh yes, this has some of that. So for example, an entire section in the middle of this film consists of some dudes chanting gibberish while ripping chickens apart with their teeth. And I think they were real chickens, too. I think they looked real. Sorry. It's another tactic that is neither scary nor interesting. It's just crap. It just annoyed me to no end. Then, if that weren't bad enough, it briefly uses some stock footage near the beginning, I think, of real-life corpses from real-life tsunamis. Now, not a problem, I guess, in and of itself if the film was actually good, but given the horrible quality of the fictional elements that are in this, it just feels distasteful, So yes, The Unbelievable is an amateuristic, worthless pile of garbage, and it is unbelievably bad. Now, I'm going to give you the availability of this in case you're a masochist. It is available on Blu-ray, believe it or not. DVD is a little harder to find nowadays. Just don't bother. Alright, our next one here is, oh boy. This one is less offensive in its badness and more just laughably bad. And that is Keitai Kareshi. I pronounced that wrong, I bet. Also known as Mobile Boyfriend, from Japan. So a high school student, Ayumi, kills herself and leaves behind a cryptic message that says, "Will be killed by boyfriend." So Ayumi's classmates Satomi and Yuka investigate her suicide, and they quickly link her death to a popular cell phone dating simulation game called Keitai Kareshi. The main features of the game include a love gauge that determines how well the player is faring, and the ability to chat with other players. Some of the supporting characters download this game onto their phones and begin interacting with their new virtual boyfriends. Soon after, they begin dying in horrible ways. There's not a whole lot to say about Mobile Boyfriend because the plot synopsis makes it sound just as stupid as it actually is. This is cliched, run-of-the-mill stuff that uses supernatural accidents to kill its characters, but the accidents are very basic and boring to watch. You also get the evil cell phone angle, which is nothing new at this point in the genre. Now, this movie gets unintentionally hilarious when the virtual boyfriends make faces on the girls' cell phones. Oh yeah, when you play this game, you get to see your boyfriend's expression when he gets mad at you. Ooh, I almost thought that was part of the movie that was supposed to be funny, but the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that it's just terribly executed. I'm not sure where they found these C-grade J-pop boy band members to play these evil virtual boyfriend spirits, but they certainly should never use them again in any other movie. You have to see these scenes for yourself. There's like half a dozen of them, and their facial expressions are some of the worst that you will ever see in a motion picture. The acting is just awful. It is awful. And then on top of all that, the direction and acting from the main characters are low grade too. Pacing is slow. You know, it's a slog to sit through. Nothing suspenseful here, and also no good death scenes. You don't even get that benefit. So yeah, Mobile Boyfriend is terrible. But, wow. The availability on this is that it is available on YouTube with subtitles. All right. Now, you know, you can skim through it, and you could probably, you know, skim through that video and look at some of the boyfriend facial expressions. I'll try to find one for the screen cap image for this movie. But if I don't, just don't even bother. Forget it. The next one is a poor one from Indonesia, and that is Terjun Pengantin. All right. So I'm borrowing this plot synopsis from the only review that is currently on IMDb, because I didn't remember all the story details on this, so I'm quoting this. So after being buried alive in a car accident, a young woman is convinced by her boyfriend that her niece, a woman is convinced by her boyfriend and her niece to go with them and some friends to a beautiful island paradise known as Bride's Island. In particular, they want to check out the fabulous waterfall known as Bride's Waterfall, which is apparently another title for this film, that can supposedly grant a person's wish. Now, although it once had a fish canning factory on it, the company relocated, and this island is now totally deserted. At least, that's what the group thinks. What they don't realize is that there is a masked psychopath who's been living alone on the island, and when he spies on the young explorers, he decides to kill them off, one by one. So as you may have guessed, this is kind of a basic American-style slasher with hot girls, stupid frat boys, and a killer. It begins with a somewhat incomprehensible series of images that I guess were meant to give some kind of backstory to the killer, but it's too brief and vague to really add anything to the story. Then we get a lengthy bikini photo shoot, which is entirely useless. Actually, everything in between the murders can be safely classified as filler material that you will not be interested in watching. Now, ironically, this was directed by Rizal Mantovani, who previously directed Jelangkung and the Kuntilanak trilogy, which were all good in my opinion, or at least watchable, as well as Kesurupan, which was not good. And the big problem with this film is that it is cheap, amateuristic, and quite low grade, you know, similar to Kesurupan in those respects. There is some flash editing that's used at times, in the beginning especially, and all of the attempts at suspense fall flat on their face and are completely ineffective. Now, there are a few positives to this, okay? Some of the outdoor shots are nice to look at, which is one of the talents from this particular director. There are also a few decent death scenes and gore effects. but they are mostly goofy and awkward in their execution, which is kind of an odd mix. Not the worst slasher ever made, that's for sure. I've definitely seen worse than this. It's not quite as historically awful as something like 9+1 that we covered from 2008, but I still can't recommend this Indonesian title. It did have a sequel, actually, that I saw on IMDb, also directed by Mantovani, but I have not been able to find it, and currently I have it on my low priority list for future views, so you can skip this. DVD availability is that I can't find a DVD, but there's a low-grade version on YouTube without subtitles if you're really itching to check it out. Alright, our next film here is from South Korea. We're doing some country hopping tonight, aren't we? Everybody is contributing to the crap from this year, so that's nice to see. This one is called Be My Guest. Again, a South Korean horror comedy this time. This is kind of a bit of a humorous film along with its horror. A company president takes his family to their cottage in a desolate woodland area, but they are immediately greeted by a disgruntled former employee who enjoys cutting limbs off of people. Now, I have mentioned many times in my reviews of South Korean movies that, the industry is particularly talented at making genre benders that use multiple genres together. Well, this is not an expertly crafted genre bender because the humor does not mesh at all with the horror. Like, at all with the horror. The comedy just did not work for me at any point, really. I mean, the gags I thought were really terrible. Silly, like slapsticky garbage with characters who basically scream and act hysterical to be funny, like the entire time. The amount of screaming in this movie for gags is so excessive, it turned me off. It took me out of the film. It's a pet peeve of mine when protagonists are obnoxious, and there are a lot of obnoxious protagonists in this movie. It's really annoying. And I think the script writing was very lazy as well. Because if you think about the premise, it could be interesting, but they just didn't even bother trying with this movie. The main reason I watched this was because Kkob-bi Kim was the lead actress. She previously starred in Midnight Ballad for Ghost Theater, which was outstanding. So obviously now I have to watch everything she's in, and this was a tough one to sit through. I mean, she's definitely the least annoying actor in this, but even she couldn't lift this one out of the gutter. So I do not recommend Be My Guest. It's not good. Availability, moderately available on DVD. I think mostly Region 3 format. Alright, our next film here is from Japan, and it's one of my blind buys that I bought, I think off of Yes Asia a few years ago. And that is called Cannibal Family, also known as Oishii Shokutaku. Now, a wounded man with a bag full of cash finds shelter in a desolate home, but the owners turn out to be sadistic, violent cannibals. That's just bad luck, That's basically the plot. It doesn't get much deeper than that. Nothing much else to it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad movie per se with a simplistic premise. And this one I don't think was terrible, but it's not good. This movie was actually direct-to-video in its home country, so it's no surprise that the production values are poor for this, as well as the acting and direction are pretty shoddy. But it hasn't stopped us before, and it hasn't stopped Japan before, from contributing some of the most disgusting horror films of all time. Fortunately, Cannibal Family does have some scenes of wince-worthy violence and gore. Think along the lines of, like, human sushi, as well as some other cannibal-themed meals that are showcased. So gorehounds may enjoy that particular aspect to this, but for me personally, it just wasn't impactful enough to be enjoyable. Also, I thought the finale was really lame. A really lame way to end your movie. I find it hard to recommend Cannibal Family because even though it does have a bit of stomach-churning gore, there are plenty of other Japanese gore films that we covered in prior years in this playlist that are far more interesting and or entertaining. Stuff like Naked Blood or Oregon, Shogun Sadism, and All Night Long 2 and 3, just to name a few. In addition, we are going to cover another sadistic, violent family film that also came out in 2009 that is far more entertaining than Cannibal Family, so look out for that in a future part of this video. And finally, the lack of availability for Cannibal Family will also deter you from seeking it out. The only way I've been able to find it is on Region 2 or Region 3 DVD without subtitles. Alright, next is another blind buy. This one I bought when I was in Japan. And I didn't even know who the director was when I bought it. I bought it off of like the DVD cover art. And this one is the Shock Labyrinth from Japan. Now this film was directed by Takashi Shimizu, who we are very familiar with, and is about a group of friends who reunite after a decade passes. So most suspiciously, one of the attendees to this reunion just so happens to be the person who mysteriously disappeared 10 years ago when they were visiting a house of horrors. Now this girl traps him in a supernatural labyrinth that mimics the time and place of when she disappeared. They attempt to find their way out and solve the mystery. Now I've heard that this film was actually inspired by a famous haunted house attraction within the Fuji-Q Highland theme park in Japan. I've actually done research on this theme park years ago, and I really kind of look forward to checking it out. It looks just terrifying. It's like, I think the premise is like a haunted hospital, and it's a huge attraction. Apparently it takes you like, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour. I don't know how long it takes to get through the whole thing. It looks terrifying. And I hope to go there at some point in the future. So the premise of this film actually offers much opportunity to construct an endlessly engaging series of deadly traps and creative phenomena. But for the most part, it's really kind of boring and incompetently crafted stuff. Even the set designs and scoring, which can be used to offset some of the other flaws and actually carry the film, are hit or miss. You know what I mean? With too many bland, forgettable hallways and rooms that are showcased. There is absolutely no excuse for that in a film of this kind. You know, if you're going to make it a gimmicky film, definitely play up the gimmick. You know what I mean? Now, Shimizu was certainly not on his A game in this film, but the script writing is probably the worst thing in Shock Labyrinth because it contributes a load of flat interaction between the characters. You know, the story itself is just not presented in an engaging, interesting manner. Even the key historical event, which they play out later on, poorly executed, and the characters just take way too long to react to things, you know what I mean? Dramatic elements in this are just awkward and unconvincing overall. It's just really lacking a dramatic basis, and the interaction just does not work. Other flaws include the mostly shoddy and occasionally bad acting, and an ending that feels like a crappy knockoff of this director's previous film, Reincarnation, which is way better than this, by the way. And, Shock Labyrinth was actually made for 3D in Japanese theaters, which means that some things are presented solely for those purposes. You know, like an object floating towards the viewer and crap like that, you know what I mean? It felt too gimmicky. So they played up the gimmicky stuff that was stupid, like the 3D effects, but they didn't play up the gimmicky stuff that was cool and fun, like the haunted house type aspects to it, or the ultimate alternate dimension of horrors. So you're probably wondering why I didn't rate this film lower in this video, given what I've said so far. And I can only say that like the premise, the setting, and some of the visuals here and there were varied and amusing enough to save this from the bottom of the barrel. But I don't recommend this. This is one of Shimizu's weakest films. So the DVD availability of this, it is moderately available on DVD. Alright, our next film is another American-style slasher. Kind of a theme in this video, which I'll get to later. And this one is actually from Taiwan, and it is called Invitation Only. Our protagonist is a seemingly lucky guy whose boss rewards him by sending him to an exclusive party on company money. Now, his evening at the party includes receiving a new car, dancing in a club with some hot chicks, gambling, and sex with a supermodel. Sounds like a pretty nice bonus. However, leaving the party is a problem, and the guests are systematically hunted down, tortured, and slaughtered by a mass killer. So this one is obviously inspired by the vacation horror films that were a trend in mainstream Hollywood during the mid to late 2000s. I definitely see some influences from Eli Roth's film Hostel specifically. So much so, in fact, that a few scenes from Invitation Only homage or even rip off Hostel at times. So as you might expect, the result is not much better than the film it draws influence from, because it has a lot of the same flaws. Script is weak. The suspense sequences are ineptly directed and edited. I've read some internet reviews that have hyped up the violence in this movie, and I'm somewhat perplexed by those compliments. Mostly because, there are a few cutaway moments where little to no blood is shown. I mean, yeah, there is some bloody violence that is shown on screen, mostly during the second half. But the death scenes are merely decent, and the torture scenes are only moderately explicit. There's really only one or two shots in the film that actually stay there and show you like some disgusting stuff. So it doesn't even really bring it with that. You know what I mean? The two protagonists are somewhat likable, and the actresses are all gorgeous, but none of them can act. And when all is said and done, the movie ends up being a by-the-book genre outing. If you're a fan of this type of movie, you may want to check it out, because I've seen worse films of this kind, but I personally dislike this. So Invitation Only, I do not recommend. It is available on Region 3 DVD with subtitles. Alright, our next film here is from Thailand. And it is called Haunted Universities. And this one is an anthology. Now, this has 4 short stories that, partially intersect at various points. The wraparound story involves a young woman who works the night shift for a coroner. So when someone dies, she drives over with her team and picks up the corpse. The 4 short stories basically involve the stories surrounding the corpses that she picks up, or are somehow connected to them or her. So story 1 here. 2 violent drug dealers target a young couple to teach them a lesson because they're slacking on their drug sales. So they agree to retrieve the drugs on campus, which they stashed in like their dorm or something, but they get chased around by ghosts because it's a haunted university, as the title suggests. Now this segment begins with a fairly effective beating involving a wine bottle. It was kind of a pretty good opening, I thought. I'm like, wow, this could get a little bit dark, a little bit gritty. But then it becomes pretty silly and uninspired once the supernatural stuff hits. Run-of-the-mill stuff with lame scoring and direction being the biggest problems. Story 2. A woman experiences supernatural phenomena that are linked to her grandfather, who executed protesters decades in the past. Now, obviously, this girl is having a rough time with her family history, and her fellow peers coerce her into entering an elevator where some students were executed. Now, that's kind of a fairly interesting premise, but the story does not tap that potential for character development. In fact, it works against it because, yes, this girl decided to attend the very same school where her grandfather ordered the execution. I'm sorry, but that's just terrible decision making. They must have more than one college in this country. Go to a different one. But everything else, even beyond that like ridiculous plot point, everything else is mediocre. The elevator scare tactics are basic stuff. You've seen much better elevator scenes in the Eye films, so go watch those. This one wasn't like terrible, but it's not good. Story 3. A medical student has a fear of working on dead bodies, so he promises his professor to work at night around the corpses to get over his fear. Mostly just a boring film with irritating protagonists, cheap jump scares, and a stupid resolution. That's all I have to say about that. That's probably the worst segment of this anthology. Story 4. 2 women are stalked by a psycho they meet in an internet chat room. So this guy knows where they live before he even interacted with them on the internet. So it was kind of a trap. So he pays them a visit and brings the gift of violence. So like most of the short films in this anthology, real basic stuff you've seen a million times before. The execution is not impressive enough to give it a pass or raise it above its mediocre premise. There are 1 or 2 moderately disturbing acts of violence in this, but strictly by-the-book stuff, don't bother. So I do not recommend Haunted Universities. Some people like it, though. I have read some positive reviews online. Just saying. It is available on YouTube with subtitles. And our final film tonight is one of the biggest disappointments I've had regarding an Asian horror film. It was a big disappointment. Now, it's probably the best of all the films that we're watching tonight, but it's still not good. And it's just purely mediocre, which is saying something bad about this particular series. And I'm talking about Whispering Corridors 5, Blood Pledge, from South Korea. So 4 friends make an oath sworn in blood to commit suicide one night, but the next morning only one is found lying dead on the school grounds. Rampant speculation about the nature of the incident races among the student body, but the 3 surviving friends are tight-lipped about any of the details. However, when the victim's sister begins searching for answers, the plot, as well as the survivors, begin to unravel. Even so, the reason for the suicide remains cloaked in mystery, but its true meaning revolves around a blood bond of another kind. Now, this remarkably impressive film series takes a turn for the worse in this installment. My personal favorite is the 4th installment, Voice, but every single title in this franchise up to this point has been entertaining and made its own contributions. And this was coming off my favorite installment, so I was riding high on Cloud 9, ready for another Whispering Corridors installment. And this one just tanked. It's not good. So Blood Pledge, say that 10 times real fast, does have some similarities to the 3rd entry, Wishing Stairs, in its commercialized mainstream feel, but it lacks the positives that made that entry effective. The storytelling structure here shifts back and forth in time, requiring the viewer's utmost attention, but it sorely lacks the dramatic core to everything. And that was a strength of this franchise up to this point. It's partially due to the lack of everyday living moments to build the characters together, since the entire film is used to show unpleasant schoolgirls bicker with one another over and over again. That's basically what you get in this film. None of the characters are endearing or remotely interesting at all in this movie. That's a big problem that I have with this movie, and it certainly was not a problem in any of this film's predecessors. But there are a few other flaws as well. For example, the horror scenes themselves are less artistic and effective here. They seem cheap and not well thought out. I cannot remember one specific horror sequence from this entire movie. I can't remember one. That is not good. Blood Pledge is not, it's not a terrible movie. It's shot nicely. It's acted pretty well. It does have a decent premise behind it, but it's still a big disappointment given the quality of this franchise. And this was the last Whispering Corridors film that was made, so it ended on a bad note. But with that said, I do think that the strength of the first 4 films definitely places this horror film series near the top of my personal favorite franchises. Now, availability of this one, it's widely available. You can get it in the US very easily. Alright, so, that's it for part 1. And it's interesting, to review the less impressive Asian horror films based on year of release, because you get to see some trends. In 2007, for instance, most of the underwhelming Asian horror movies were ghost films. In 2009, most of the less impressive Asian horror films were either slashers or movies based on violence or focusing on violence. But with that said, some of the best Asian horror movies from 2007 were also ghost films, and at least 2 of my favorites from 2009 are movies that have bloody violence. So I guess you just have to take the good with the bad, right? So we've already finished the Asian horror films from 2009 that I did not like. So be sure to join me for part 2 of this video where, we'll get cracking on some of the more watchable titles, in my opinion. And as always, we'll see you next time.